Review Committee hearing presentations on Statement of Qualifications number 6, the Regional Vision Blueprint and for Economic Development. Welcome the next team from Calthorpe Associates. The time available. If you've also been given some questions, if you can either address those during your presentation or Marcella, they've been given questions. Just now. That's when everybody else got it.
Yeah, you would be setting up and you would be.
Yeah. And my only last request is if time is available at the end, we would like to have the panel ask some other questions. So. Our plan is to have a big. Thank you. Please proceed. And you can introduce yourself as you go along. We'll introduce ourselves when we ask the questions. So go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Is this on and ready to roll?
Yep.
Okay. That thing. I'll press play on this.
It's already going.
Oh, okay. I'm wasting time. I will get moving. Okay. Well, on behalf of the Calthorpe and Fregonese team, we want to thank you for having us here. We're very excited to be proposing. My name is Joe DiStefano. I lead the regional and large-scale planning team at Calthorpe Associates. I've been there about 15 years, and I've actually managed or co-managed just about every regional and large-scale project that the combination of Calthorpe Associates and Fregonese Associates has undertaken. We're very pleased to be here, and we're very excited to address the kind of whole confluence of issues, kind of being experienced by other regions, but in this region in particular, everything from climate and adaptation issues, environmental issues, and Everglades restoration, transportation and mobility, water quality and supply issues, economy and housing, supply and affordability. I mean, you name the issue, you guys have got it, and I think it's just but we see that as a series of very exciting opportunities to focus an effort and to kind of maybe come to a grand regional solution and a series of implementation mechanisms to address that. I have specifically been involved in this region over the past few years in authoring the Southeast Florida 2060 document, working with SFRPC and the Treasure Coast, and that document and both the work plan and the issues and the research that went into that did serve as sort of formative components of the process that we're now proposing on now. So we're very excited to have done that and thus have some depth in that respect. I'm just going to briefly introduce our team and then allow people to come up and speak for themselves. So the prime on this is Calthorpe Associates. I would be the project manager working with Peter. We also have we've brought David Osherman into the fold as well. Very important local on-the-ground person. He's been working with Calthorpe and Fregonese over the past 20 years and has actually been very, very important in developing many of the methods, particularly the scenario side methods that drive a lot of these kinds of processes. We'll be working in partnership with Fregonese Associates, with John and Glenn and his team. And then we bring a very strong group of local consultants, beginning with EDSA, who really bring a strong grounding. We've got Paul Kissinger here, a strong grounding in kind of understanding local planning and design, transportation and mobility issues, also environmental issues. Seaman and Larson, perhaps the most versed in kind of the regulatory and implementation components of growth at the both regional and the local scale. They also bring a lot of national experience. The White House group for transportation and also environmental analysis. We got Todd Brower here, and Wade White would also be part of the team. RCLCO, very important, looking at grand economic issues, also housing and market issues. We've got Greg Logan here from Orlando. And then also we've brought on Robin Rather in Collective Strength, who we've worked with. She's out of Austin, Texas, and she's really been a very important part of making sure that our processes listen to people, speak to their values, and speak with those values. She's excellent in polling and designing of processes. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Peter Calthorpe.
So these are some of the regional plans we've done. We've got a little experience here, and we've been doing it for over 20 years. That said, the danger, of course, is that we're set in our ways, and that we kind of know it all, we've done it all, so don't bother us with the facts. The reality is, and what I'd like to explain to you, is that in every single project we've ever undertaken, we've engaged the locals in ways that has created innovation. that has changed the field and helped the field develop. And so, where's the board? There it is. So I'll just start at the very, very beginning. 1989, Portland. They had a state law not unlike concurrency here. It was very vague on land use transportation nexus. It was a overarching kind of framework, but it wasn't producing the right kinds of results on the ground. And we were asked to come in, and this is when I met John and started working with him. And the innovation here was the first time at a regional planning level that land use and transportation were locked together. And over time, we've had tremendous success. You know, we all know the various levels of implementation that happen in Portland, but here's the bottom line. Vehicle miles traveled per household per capita has gone down while the rest of the country has gone up. It's a huge success story. It's largely built out of that one innovation, which nobody had done at the time. Envision Utah at the other end of the political spectrum, where you know, a lot of people discount Portland because, of course, it's just a bunch of leftists who are willing to do anything. But in Utah, it wasn't quite that way. And the innovations that we came up with there, in order to engage people at their most profound level, first was to do scenario planning. This was the first time scenario planning was done at a regional scale, and we thought we couldn't come in there and do an analysis and come up with a solution. We needed to go in there and give people choices. And that was the genesis of that whole innovation there. The results were extraordinary. The second innovation that we developed there, and it's one that is really still key, and it's something that has to happen everywhere, is the idea of engaging people with trade-offs rather than giving people an opportunity to stand up and speak just their minds and lay out their ideology. Have them grapple with the problem. This is the Governor Levitt at a workshop of 500 people trying to sort out where the chips fall. And this is a process of actually saying, well, where do you want growth to happen? This is something now the ULI has canonized as part of its toolbox, and people use it all the time. This was an innovation that we came up with in Utah to make that happen. In Los Angeles, the innovation was to really begin thinking historically. That hadn't been a framework for the other plans, but what is the historic identity of the place, and how does that play into the future? And we all know environmental limits are part of the framework for regional planning and mobility. But the idea of incorporating the economic structure of the region was something that was first pioneered here during the Compass Plan. And we know now that's going to be a key element in this set of circumstances. These are high-density employment areas. These are low-density employment areas. These are the trade routes, the historic flow of goods and services through the region. There is a geography to the economy of a region that can be mapped and played out as part of the regional planning understanding. Freeways, airports, these are all elements, and then now we have the high-speed rail. These are all foundational in terms of how the economy sorts out. There's of course a whole non-economic side that's going to be, non-physical side to the economy that's critical as well. But this was the first time a regional plan tried to simultaneously work with larger economic forces. In Louisiana, most recently, we began the process of really looking at how profound environmental challenges would play out at the regional scale. That wasn't a big issue in Portland. That was preserving the ag lands was already in place. It was the land use transportation. So each one of these planning efforts led us to a new set of issues, which led to a new set of tools and capabilities. Some of these are very similar, but different in nature. But the coastline, the levee issue, water levels, prosperity really for Louisiana became one of the key issues. What are the economic drivers that are going to make it happen? And affordable housing, workforce housing, and of course, traffic, we all know. Now, most recently, we've been working at the scale of the whole state of California. trying to implement SB 375. And in order to do this, we need to gather together all the analytical tools that we have kind of evolved over the last 20 years and begin to consolidate them into what is most focused, what's most useful in terms of developing regional scenarios. And we have 3 models that John and I and our firms have evolved over the time, which we think are absolutely state-of-the-art. Rapid Fire, Urban Footprint, and Envision Tomorrow. The key to these models is that, first, Rapid Fire allows us very early in the process and very quickly to identify scenarios, but to identify metrics that go way beyond the normative, traffic and land use traffic models, TAZ-based models. And the whole series of co-benefits, whether it's water, most significantly in this case, we've added some very significant metrics that we think are really key to how to make the right kind of choices and how to present the challenges of a region. So greenhouse gas, we all get that in the models. I mean, there are tons of models out there. They're all going to do the basic stuff: land consumption, VMT, auto fuel consumption, building energy. These are kind of normative at this point, water. But I have long been struggling with the cost of infill infrastructure costs. It's nice to say infill is the answer, but it's much harder to identify what the fiscal barriers and things that need to be overcome really are. And we've finally gotten some algorithms and some measures and capacity in that. So what does it really cost for infrastructure? And what are the long-term implications of different types of infrastructure investments, the O&M costs? These are all now built into the model. And finally, what are the revenue consequences to the different kinds of land use future? And that, of course, when you bundle those 3 together, what do you have? You have the fiscal impact on local jurisdictions, which we know is really becoming more and more in our time a key driver. That translates to kind of on the sidewalk reality of what does it cost? What's the cost of living in these various futures? And that's a translation that can only be made if you have a really solid foundation in what infrastructure costs are, what O&M costs are, what the fiscal impact on cities is going to be. The newest element that we've added to our modeling is health. The health implications, it's talked about a lot in the new urbanist circles. We now have been able to incorporate that so we can really begin to look at where we head there. Now, I'm going to let John talk about how our process works and a little bit more about how these tools and what the implementation strategies would be.
Thanks, Peter. This is to show you how well we can recover from the unexpected. Did I unplug it? Well, it looks like I did. Okay. So one of the things that, as Peter mentioned, we've been working together for 20 years. I was the planning director of Portland Metro when I met Peter. We were doing 2040. And our goal here is really to work with you on creating a successful, lasting vision for Southeast Florida. And I think one of the things we want to talk about is how to do it. There's definitely a part for the technology and for figuring out how to do implementation, but fundamentally, you've got to make this as something that will that is locally adapted, that reflects local culture, and really has a local voice. Regional plans that make a difference, and as Peter said, we not only have been involved in the creation of these, we've been involved in the implementation of these plans and many of the others throughout the country, is to really understand how that happens. It starts with a foundation that's based on understanding local values. We're using Robin Rather for this. She's a great person from Austin. She's someone that we've used starting with Envision Central Texas and on. Robin is really good at finding out what those values are, both from polling and from interviews, and be able to craft this so that you can talk to the public about things that they care about. One of the big problems with regional visions is when they come out and they talk to the public and they say, we want to increase mobility and reduce VMT. Most people don't care. They don't know what that is. They don't know how that implicates their lives. You need to make these visions something that people will understand how it impacts their day-to-day life and how this is relevant. That's how you get tens of thousands of people involved. We've look to define our audience to get below the people that will come to a meeting. Even at a region this size, you can maybe get 1% to come to a meeting, probably a lot less. If you have 3,000 or 4,000 people go to a meetings, that seems like a lot. You're just skimming the surface. Those are really important. Those are stakeholders. They're motivated. They're very knowledgeable. A lot of them are going to be local government officials and planning commissioners and so forth. But you've got to get beyond that. We found that there's about 10% that I would call fans of planning. They love to follow this. They love to participate from home. They like to participate on the internet. You've got to draw them in. And there's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands potentially of people in a region this size that would be involved that way and would follow it. They're going to be opinion leaders among their groups. They're going to keep this thing lively and out there in the public. 50% aren't going to go to a meeting, aren't going to, you know, sign up on Twitter for Twitter feeds, but they're going to be interested enough to follow it in the press. And it's really important that we work with the press to get them interesting material, that it stays in the paper. And that doesn't mean just asking them to publicize a meeting. You got to have good stuff that goes out to the press and work with the press to do that. So we would work with you and and the public involvement team to develop a public involvement toolkit that includes all of these things, that is really effective at drawing large participation. One thing we found, if you start with people's values, if people watch this develop in a transparent way, that when it comes to the end, you're going to be implementing a vision that's well known, popular, and that's much easier sell than if you're going in and it's this kind of high-level vision that no one knew about. We do a prominent web presence. That's more than, again, just putting out meetings or posting documents. You've got to be interacting with people on that. You've got to be putting in interesting material. We use social media. We've had success. The last two projects we did, 30% of the participants were under 30. That means we know how to be a good Facebook friend, not an irritating Facebook friend or a silent Facebook friend. We send people just the right amount of information, little tidbits that make sure they stay on top of it. And when we ask them to come to meetings, many of them do or they participate.
Más de 5.500 residentes de Tulsa se pronunciaron acerca del futuro.
We work with the press and we work in a multicultural environment. Let's kind of stop him from talking for a minute. But basically, I'm Latin American. I grew up in a bilingual household. A lot of our team is going to have those capabilities. But mainly, we work with you and your folks to make sure that everybody's involved, including the various languages, both in music, or basically in radio, in TV, and in press. In fact, radio is an important part of getting a hold of a lot of people, young people that would not otherwise be involved. We reach out with traditional means. We have in-house publication design. We can arrange for printing. We do a lot of this stuff. We boil these complex regional ideas down to a really cool 8-page brochure or a postcard that gets people interested. And we use video. Frankly, one of the things that we're proud of is our ability to translate this into video. Again, we will work with other videographers, but we do our own videos. We do our own special effects. I'd like to show you a compilation of just a couple of videos we did last year, one from the Louisiana Gulf Coast, one from a Portland suburb, where we try to empower local people to describe these issues to their peers and talk about this in a really effective way.
The river knows it sets me free. The blue sky, she brings me in, she gives me wings. Yeah.
My dad bought this place before I was born. I was born here, and I'm going to die here.
And then when they put the levees in, you had this immediate flip to where you've had over the last 8 years an average of about 28 square miles of land loss per year. And there were some decades in there where we lost 34, 35 square miles a year. And then in the last 5 years, we've lost an average of almost 70 or 80 square miles of land per year.
Slowly, we'll have less land, so we'll all have to move. And you know, when you're born and raised on the bayou and you're used to living off the land and the bayou's at your back door, so to speak, it's hard for people to grasp that eventually they will have to leave because we don't have any more land.
My name is John Gottschall, and I teach photography here at the Arts and Communication Magnet, and I teach another class called Urban Design. When I asked the kids to design a street that they would be interested in designing, what they came up with was, A, interesting public places where they can listen to music, perhaps, where they can just even walk around.
Hey, after school, you guys want to go to Bed Bath & Beyond and hang out?
Beaverton feels really
concrete and pavement and not very friendly.
It is so expansive. It's like a concrete jungle.
If we change the lane sizes, put some streetscape in there, make the left turn safer, poke through a couple more cross streets.
If we can turn it from.
And it's just a real quick example of how to give you, the people here to be speaking. You don't want to have out-of-town consultants lecturing people. You want these issues to come from local values, solutions to come from locals, and that is going to get people involved a lot more than, you know, some kind of high-level thing. We really work with popular culture and popular communications. We also really like the fact that you put these 4 summits in there. We love doing those kinds of things, and we see them as key issues and key ways to integrate that. We use the instant voting. We use workshops and so forth. One of the things we like to do, though, is to not just get people there and have them have a warm, fuzzy feeling. They need to make trade-offs. These tough issues that you're dealing with are tough because people oftentimes have just come from their preconceived point of view. They don't ever change. They kind of get set in their ways. This is something that allows us to really work through those issues and allows people to make the trade-offs. When we do workshops, they're both fun and they're relevant. People interact with each other. They learn to do trade-offs. They learn on facts about their region and some of the tough issues, and they learn to work with each other to make trade-offs. People come out of these things. We not only get information from them, but they are changed, and they become, in many times, some of the biggest champions of the solutions that come out. We also like the fact that you guys are going to go towards summit number 2. And I think you guys were thinking about the base case. One of the advantages we bring is that we can get to alternatives very quickly. We have really sophisticated software. We've done this for 20 years. We can allow people to start talking about alternatives other than what happens if we just continue on the way we are. If that's all people wanted, we wouldn't be here today. People want to talk about alternatives. We can get to that sooner and spend more time figuring out what's the vision and how do we implement that. And talking about the regional vision and implementation, it's really important to understand that vision has got to capture that goal. It's got to be, that part is something that's got to be kind of magical that people remember. When you look at these visions, these are things that people still use every day. They still talk about it. It's still relevant. It's still something that people are using. We know in implementing it, there's certain tools that you should be looking at. One is you've got to work to align your transportation plans to the vision. That means coming up with practical solutions that can be turned into the RTP, that can be turned into those issues. You've got to be able to continue with the demonstration project. We think it's great you're doing demo projects. That's something we've done on all our projects because you've got to get people to understand how this looks on the ground. These often are just going to be colored blobs. You're going to be trying to say, you went from red to green, that's really good. People need to know what that means to them and how that works. And again, working through the demonstration projects through this will be helpful. One of the biggest things you can do in implementation is continue demo projects and laying out how those will happen, how those demo projects will bring change, and getting basically a volunteer group to move that change ahead is really important. Regulatory reform, being able to put together not a model code that everyone adopts, but helping cities understand what the problems are with their code, have them have examples that they can pick from, but work through their own solutions, understanding the finances, especially of infill and redevelopment. We've done a lot of work like this, and our models go down to the building level. Every building has a pro forma. We understand how to get things done at that level. And working with strategic partnerships. One of the great examples around the country people talk about is the Portland streetcar. People don't understand that that was a partnership between the private sector, the neighborhood, and the city. A third of that was paid by private money to redevelop an old rail yard in north of downtown. Those are the kinds of partnerships that are going to be bringing the future together, and those are the kinds of implementation strategies we could put together here and we put together in the past. I'm going to ask Greg now to follow up and talk about the economy.
Thank you, John. So how do you think about the future of the economy? That's not always a part of plans. They tend to be very spatial, but obviously there's some very important non-spatial aspects to coming up with a vision. The next couple of slides I'm going to share with you are an example from San Diego, where we're working on a regional vision that is also thinking about some of the non-spatial aspects, including robust long-term visions of what the future economy could be, not just coming up with one vision, but coming up with multiple visions of what it could be, going beyond, studying current situation analyses or thinking about, what directions are the economy moving and what would we like to capture. But working with a task force there comprised of economic development professionals and academics and people from the community, major employers, to think about what sort of visions might make sense in the future if we were to pursue one or more of those visions. They're not necessarily mutually exclusive. What sort of strategies would we need to put in place to realize them? What implementation plans would we need to put in place, and to model that and think about what can we learn from that in terms of what the implications would be for the future. I'm going to show you just some examples of what some of the strategies are in San Diego, some of the major employers there. So a strategy could be thinking about our existing industry mix, which not unlike here, tourism is a part of the San Diego economy, protecting and enhancing existing industries, or maybe looking at a region of convergence. Where does the fact that you have tourism and telecommunications and biotech, where might those merge and create other opportunities we might not have thought of? Or capitalizing on our existing educational institutions and becoming a place that we actually export that knowledge and technology. Becoming the biotech capital of the world is another scenario that we're looking at. And at this stage, we're thinking about what are these scenarios, what would it take in terms of education, catalytic investments, leadership, new institutions, and so on to make that happen in terms of the strategies. Could they become the western seat of the federal government? A clean tech powerhouse could be another scenario. Capitalizing in San Diego on the fact that they have a relationship with Central America. Just as here we have a strategic relationship with South America. Could this be a cross-national mega region as well, and how does that play into the economy? Building on the tourism, becoming, in San Diego's case, the Pacific Rim Financial Center. Could this region be more of a financial center between North and South America, or between Europe and North America? So those are some of the scenarios that we're looking at there. We also are sponsors of and the implementers of the Urban Land Institute's Priced Out series of workshops, where we've looked at another issue that you have here. It's the relationship between where people live and where they work. And we've done a series of studies that ULI has published called Priced Out, and looking at the deficit in workforce housing, and sort of challenging the assumption that because of the downturn that we had in housing, that somehow we've solved the workforce housing issue, which of course we know we haven't. Thinking about that in terms of some of the big demographic trends, the sprawling metropolitan areas, the increasing diversity of our communities, the sort of the demographic dumbbell of us aging boomers at one end and the young Gen Y households coming along at the other end, the lasting impacts of the Great Recession and how that plays out. This is an example of how we've looked at it spatially. The different boxes there, upper left-hand corner is one-person households, and the bottom right are four-person households. And this is looking at where we would identify the relative imbalance of housing types in different employment centers as compared to the rest of the metro area. And we've given a lot of thought to this, the next generation coming along, Generation Y, that tells us in surveys that we've done that they want to live in more exciting urban environments. And we know that a lot of them are coming into the rental market now. They're going to become homeowners a few years down the road. Where will they live, and where will they afford to live? They're telling us that they like these kinds of environments. They're willing to pay more to live where they want. Lifestyle is very important to them. Can we provide the products that they want and use that to achieve the urban form that's desired by the community? And thinking about how we pay for that, we've looked at lots of different strategies. One is thinking about the transportation strategies as we invest in transit. This map shows the value impact that those transit investments, those transportation investments have on the land value. Can we capture some of that increase in land value early on by the investments that we make, and use that to make sure that we can have exciting transit-oriented development and be able to provide for workforce and affordable housing? With that, Charlie is going to talk to us about implementation.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to be a part of this team. Most of you all know me for my work in South Florida, but I want to We bring to this project a background of 30 some odd years working around the country, and some of those areas that didn't have little circles of regional plans, that's where we worked. We have, for example, been working with the state of New Jersey for about 32 years now. And we did the Pinelands Comprehensive Management Plan in the late 70s. In the 80s and 90s, we did the State Development and Redevelopment Plan. In just the last 5 years, we did the New Jersey Highlands Management Plan. And that has allowed us to look at regional planning and implementation programs over decades of time and understand what works, doesn't work. And that kind of experience is something we bring to this. We bring to it also from a different perspective. I come from not just an understanding of planning, but also the law, a very sophisticated understanding of the law. We've practiced around the country, we're familiar with Florida law, et cetera. So that perspective allows us, I think, to bring something additional. I've been really thinking a lot recently about implementation of plans and looking back somewhat disappointed on our growth management and regulatory programs. And one of the things I've begun to focus on is other means of what I call now non-traditional implementation, education, designing visions and plans from the get-go to educate the constituents who are affected by it, to affect so that when there's a debate, a political debate at local government, citizens can be armed with specific knowledge that addresses the subject and try to guide the process back from just raw politics into what's going on. And we did that in the Pinelands Plan because at the outset we knew we were going to have to retrain people. We were going to have to teach them new rules that they didn't understand. So that as the plan was written, we were very careful to not use language that was not understandable. The policy and factual bases were very tailored to predicting that. I see three things that are critical to making this vision successful, and they have to be conceived of as you're preparing it. The first is that educational role, and it's not just educating the public, it's educating the elected officials, it's educating the private sector of the reasons for the rules. I don't know how many times I hear people ask, why do we do this? The second is to use that to initiate implementation activities by individuals, by organizations, not just by government action. Engage the private sector. I think Alexander Garvin said, successful city planning, the definition is public action that generates a desirable and a widespread private market, sustained market reaction. That's what we need to do, I believe, in the next 20 to 40 years in South Florida. Instead of having adversarial relationships with the private sector, we need to become collaborators with them to achieve what we need to do. Too many of our local regulations treat everybody alike, equal opportunity, length of time and cost. We should reward people who want to do what the government says. Mike, I think of the Boca Raton, the urban village in North Boca, and our client decided to do what you all planned, and it took 2.5 years and almost $6 million and missed the market.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, it wasn't your fault, but the reality is that collaboration, having had that public impetus, should have been able to get through the process at a very quickly process. Engaging the organizations. There are lots of nonprofit organizations. They need to be identified. They may be working on social matters or cultural matters, but if they understand the vision and its direction, they can become very powerful collaborators. We're very pleased also to bring a lot of experience in South Florida. Most of you all know we've worked in most of the communities from Monroe County to Indian River over about a 25-year period. We have lots of friends, but we also know the private sector in South Florida very, very well, and we believe that the knowledge of what they need to be able to engage and be a part of it is something we bring to it as well. I'm very pleased to be, this is a wonderful team. I don't think you'll find a bigger background and experience in regional planning and successful programs over long periods of time. Peter?
On time here. Oh. Fine. You know, just a footnote on the education side of it. Don't forget that when Daniel Burnham did the first most famous regional plan, they produced the Wacker Manual, which was taught in elementary schools. So the idea that you needed to have a strong foundation in public understanding is really at the heart, and it's too often overlooked in all these things. So that's our team. We are small. And we think that's an advantage because the reality is we want to lean very heavily on the consortium. We think that, and it's my experience having worked in all these different regional plans, that the most salient element of success has to do with the quality of the client. It's you guys. And when we went to work for Envision Utah, they had a big tent. They had already done the hard work of bringing all sorts of disparate groups together and had been sitting at a table thinking about how to confront this. And we think that that's what you are doing, what you have been doing, and that foundation is really going to be the key to success here. And so we see our role as just helping you. That said, I don't think we come with lots of tools and lots of experience, and I hope we can leave as much of that in your hands as we go. But that kind of catalytic moment of innovation really is also another key element to how this thing becomes a success. We've never done one where we didn't have to create something that hadn't been used before. And I take it as a sign of real failure if we don't do that. And we've been able to do that, and we've been able to lead the field in regional planning and provide the kind of direction and tools that now are normative to all the teams you're probably interviewing today. Scenario planning, sketch modeling, a whole range of techniques in terms of community participation. These are all things that got cooked up as a result of the special needs of these regional entities. And so we think innovation is really at the key of it. So, you know, in closing, it's clear that we are at a seminal moment. There's no question about it. The challenges you're confronting are global challenges. A slowdown in the economy, and what happens to the Western industrial basis? How do we live our lives? Environmental challenges that are also global. These are forces, quite frankly, that are going to generate a whole nother level of discussion that really hasn't normally been on the table at this scale, because thinking long term makes you deal with the really big issues, and not in a short-term piecemeal fashion, but in a long-term systemic fashion. And those two big issues, the economy and the environment, are front and center for you guys in ways that are almost more profound and salient than in many other places. And so using this regional plan to deal with that, I think, is not only going to be the key to success, but also the key to leadership. Leadership, I think, is about three things: listening carefully to people and how they think about their world. Finding tools and methodologies and practices that are innovative, that are unique to the challenge at hand. And then the third piece, education, bringing everybody along in the game. And those are the three steps that we think are really going to be at the heart of this. There's a million techniques and technologies involved, but we think we have the capacity to take those three giant steps, and that's what we think is necessary here. So thank you very much for the time. We have some extra time.
No, yeah, that's right. We better get the questions.
Yeah. Five questions we have, so I won't read them out. You can just address them together in order, and you may have covered them, but after that, then we can.
Do we want to readdress each one of these and kind of pull it out? I think that economic development, we addressed, you know, one of the most salient issues is that hadn't been a big part of regional planning. It now is. As a matter of fact, it is one of the key drivers, and it has to do not just with spatial issues, workforce placement, affordable housing, cost of living as it relates to transportation.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
All the rest of these things. But also, it has to do with education, and not just in terms of educating people about regional policies, but education in general, non-spatial issues that I think we have a very strong approach to. You know, the building foundation. Joe DeStefano helped gather that material for you. You know, so we actually have a good grasp on all these things. Yeah, why don't you add a couple things there? Yeah, don't let me dominate here. Guys, push me aside.
Just to speak a little bit more to this your question number 2 on building foundation, we did indeed gather and sort of itemize and assess a lot of the information that is out there back in 2007-8. Obviously, that's the past and things have changed. But overall, in terms of bringing together disparate data sources, producing kind of a common database upon which to do this work, and that's a big part of this work from the technical side. So we have the technical capacity and have developed sort of unique methodologies actually in the past couple of years to really sort of swing together 200 different jurisdictions' plans, for example, and turn them into a common language by which we can then produce common metrics. And that's actually a very important resource. And I think that perhaps it's the academic community here, it's FIU or somewhere else that becomes an eventual data depository. So all this work that goes on in a plan like this, I mean, you're putting an immense amount of work into compiling data, making it usable by far more jurisdictions, organizations than otherwise. Than would otherwise be able to use it. That needs to sit in a place that is publicly accessible, and that database needs to be designed well. So insofar as a process like this utilizes that data and combines information, utilizes it to produce grand scenarios and metrics and models, that needs to be also made accessible for the long term and becomes a really strong kind of formative element. It becomes a real go-to place and is a big part of technical capacity enhancement, and something that the RPCs have already begun to do.
I'd like to add one thing to that distinguishes us from, I think, a lot of the other teams. We have put together not just the local plans, but what the local plans means in terms of development. We could put that together for Southern California, 35,000 square miles, 22 million people. It's the size of Indiana except 5 times the population. That is still in use, and we've done it with tools that are so easy to use that when we talk about scenarios, we now hand the tool, Envision Tomorrow, back to the local governments. They fiddle with it and hand it back. We can set up a conversation with locals in a language that they talk about. I was a planning director. I know what that looks like, and I know how to work with locals to do that, as we all do. We've all worked for them. And I think in terms of building from existing plans, we have a unique capability of really showing where your existing plans are taking. And then when it comes to implementation, understanding how to take those existing plans and do something with them, what you have to do. You can't just go and change that stuff overnight. You need to come up with strategies that people can actually implement. That's what makes it implementable, is that you understand what the problems are and how to do it, and you devise programs that make it easy to do.
That's great.
So the next one is public participation. John, do you want to add more there?
How does your team propose to engage the public? And I can maybe...
Well, I think there's...
Wait a minute, I want to add
go ahead.
thing, which is that on that last question, David Osherman, I mean, we left off in '07, and David, working for another firm, now working for us, actually pitched in and worked, I think, in the next stage. So I think we're about as up to speed with all the databases as we
He did that image right there, that image of South Florida.
Yeah, so that's just another component of that.
I think in terms of public participation, we didn't want to come in with like the whole thing laid out. I think that it was clear from what you have put out is that you want to know who has the skills and who's done this before, and work together with it. And we really want to do that. Our ideas for public participation we've laid out. I think it's number one, find out what the values are, find out what the different groups are, find out what they want to talk about, and communicate with them on their level and what they want to talk about. Not about what the regional planners want to talk about, what is interesting to them and what's valuable to them. Secondly, you've got to be multicultural. This is really important. Every culture has its leaders. Every culture has different ways of talking about it. When we were in Tulsa, we got the most participation from the African American community ever, and it was because we went and one of the radio station owners got really jazzed about Planet Tulsa. We went on the hip-hop stations in the morning. We were out at Vans with the radio guys. The DJs were all into it. We had a huge participation, and part of it is going to where people normally talk about things and working with them in different languages. I think inviting people to participate in many different ways, in workshops, yes, Facebook, online, fascinating websites, just watching videos passively, reading about it in the paper, helping the press tell the story to the public. All those things are part of the public participation. And finally, getting people involved in the celebration at the end. I think people need to know where you're going, what you're doing, and that people are excited about it. That helps build momentum. A lot of this is going to have to be implemented by politicians. And it's really helpful if those politicians, if their electorate knows what they're talking about and is predisposed to that solution. And in these things that have been popular, basically, sometimes a politician has been surprised. They go back out after a year and a half of this, and their electorate has changed. They're knowledgeable about the issue, and they're ahead of them. And they have to run to catch up to their electorate. That really helps, and that's what's made these other ones popular.
And maybe if I could, I'll just add one more little piece there, which is that we really do, and I think Peter touched on this, we do think that your 4 summit series, or kind of using those as kind of big points of interaction, maybe very high level points of interaction, that's a great way that produces a kind of really strong foundation. And one thing we do recommend is that, based on the tools that we developed over the last couple of years, we can indeed bring very powerful alternatives to Summit number 2. So as opposed to sort of engaging in number 1 and saying, this is what we're going to do, this is what other places are going to have done, and get people excited, and then in number 2 say, this is where we're going to be if we continue to grow as we have been, which is, I think, the way it's scoped. We actually think you can bring very powerful, a full range of alternatives. You can bring a full range of metrics, all those metrics that Peter showed in those slides, that plus more. Get people to talk about public health, fiscal impacts, household costs, adaptation and greenhouse gas issues. Get them to speak about that in spring 2012. Sort of put that to bed, and then spend the vast majority of the time on this process doing what I think is so important in this process, which is developing that vision and how it's going to get implemented. I mean, the alternatives sort of thread through the process, but we can do that very quickly. What used to take us 2 years, we can now do in 6 months. So, and that's, I think, a very important part of this. And so in between those summits are all these traditional and non-traditional outreach and engagement efforts that occur. So these summits become these big founding moments, the benchmarks and the cornerstones of different pieces of this process.
Okay, number 4, in terms of team experience, I think we've submitted to you all the different experiences, and John and I have been the prime contractors on all those. I have been the prime contractor. I think one of the interesting things is that, the roving mic. There we go. Thank you. Thank you. One of the interesting things is that the follow-on. We've been engaged in almost every single one of those regional plans on a follow-on basis. There are other firms that have come in and done work, but they haven't been the prime drivers. And maybe I'll let John, you speak a little bit more about how the follow-on stuff, because I think it's a signature of success when we're asked to come back and stay involved.
And that's true, and we haven't, it's not like we set this up to be vampires and just hang out. It's like, it's that when you make good relationships, we enjoy that area. We're both pretty small firms, and it's really great to come back and help people implement that. We have different skills, and other firms are involved too. It's not just us. But we are, for example, working in Compass, again, we went there first in 2002 to implement that plan through their greenhouse gas emissions. We're both using our latest tools. We're both having roles there. We've been involved on and off for the last many years. Portland Metro, I was the planning director for Portland Metro when Peter came in, and we're still involved there. We're doing, again, greenhouse gas infill analysis for the city of Portland. That project that I showed you, the video of Beaverton, was implementation of 2040 at a very fine level. I just flew in from Baton Rouge. The plan, the Baton Rouge Comprehensive Plan rewrite, was adopted last night that very much brought Baton Rouge, which is now the largest parish in Louisiana, up to speed with Louisiana Speaks. The Louisiana code that we worked on is going to be implemented there. And this is all done voluntarily. This is something that the Baton Rouge Mayor-President Kip Holden was skeptical about Louisiana Speaks now, and really doesn't embrace Louisiana Speaks as much as he's really excited about his new plan and talking regionalism. When we first went there, Baton Rouge and New Orleans hated each other, would never talk. They're now cooperating, working together.
They still hate each other.
No. They're becoming...
come on.
Well, they don't like each other, but they are working together for a regional rail.
So I claim lots of stuff.
Yeah, but not that. But anyway, the bottom line is, I think that this is something we've been doing for a long time, as we've mentioned, and it's not just the plan, it's the implementation. And frankly, the thing that gets our juices flowing is the implementation, is working to figure out how to do it and actually being able to help people do that. The biggest part of that, as Peter mentioned, is empowering locals. And the biggest part of this process is not for you guys to be, you know, say, wow, that was a great consultant. We leave and there's a big vacuum. We want you guys to be successful. You go back to Envision Utah. We're still working with them, but we're like way in the background. They're out front. They're the ones that are leading the workshops. They're the ones that are leading the redesigns. We're providing kind of almost a back office support for them. We want that to happen here. We want the regional agencies, the local agencies, to be the ones that are empowered to do that. And that, I think, is the success of development that we bring.
Go on, John. Tell them about the day of Fregonesi.
I had to, it's a little embarrassing, but anyway, I had to basically, on my 60th birthday, which was Monday, be in Baton Rouge for the hearing to adopt the plan. And after that was done, the mayor issued a proclamation declaring August 22nd, 2011, John Fregonesi Day in Baton Rouge. So there you go. That's really fun. And it's very flattering. It's never happened to me before.
Talk about the locals taking.
Yeah, right. Well, they want me to, I mean, I feel almost like a local in Baton Rouge. My mom is from Louisiana. It goes a long way in Louisiana if your mom is from Louisiana. I can tell you that. Anyway.
Do you want us to just keep going through these, or do you want to
Only
ask
to the
questions?
degree that you feel you want to highlight anything that you didn't already say to us, because then we'll go to questions. And that
Okay,
Let's
now
do
leave
questions.
I thought maybe these were the questions, but
Yeah.
you want to talk to one of them.
I only have one more thing to offer, maybe, which is I was just looking at number 4, please, 4.4, how we'd work with new members. I think one thing I didn't emphasize as much as I wanted to was just that we would lean, and I think appropriately, I think it's the right thing to do is to lean fairly heavily, particularly on the technical expertise in the consortium. So, the places, the water district, the universities, I think are the right places to be.
The DOT.
The DOT for technical modeling and the transportation system. Our models interacting with the DOT, I think, are very important. But adaptation, climate issues, water quality, water supply, some of the real critical environmental factors that I think will be critical drivers in this process. There is already so much technical expertise here that I think it makes the most sense for us to just directly interface with those entities. And I think we have the right people on the team to interface technically. And we have a lot of experience working with academics and DOTs from, in every region that we've worked. But I just wanted to mention, because it did ask us to call it, I think that's a really critical piece. Also, I would say actually in the running of workshops. So we talked about the summits, but and that's a handful of sort of high-level events. But I think really it's the training of locals, members of the consortium, to get out there and engage more people directly. I mean, in Envision Utah, we ran 6 major regional workshops. Envision Utah ran hundreds. They continue to do that. Yeah, I mean, it's an unbelievable number of people that have been directly touched, like literally touched a chip. I mean, it's amazing. Now we have the web and all kinds of other things, but then we had to cut out chips with scissors. I did tens of thousands of those. People, but they continue to use them. They're all bent and they don't stick anymore. But
Okay. Let me see. Where do we leave off? I think, Roman, you're next, I think, from the last set of questions.
Yeah,
Yes, you're first.
What's unique about this project? Again, going back to Peter's idea that you've done so many, and how come? What should we expect different as an outcome in this project?
Well, I thought I was being pleasingly evasive by calling that the innovation, but I don't want to be flip or sarcastic. That really is the reality. I don't want to know. I don't want to have an answer for you today. If I did, I think that would be flip. The reality is we need to work with you, we need to get engaged, we need to listen carefully, and we need to come to the table with as few preconceptions as possible and be as open to absolutely new challenges that will generate new techniques and innovations. And so I don't have the answer to that, and I think that's the place I think we should all start. Now, we all have preconceptions, and the problem is to keep them out of the way, quite frankly. There are those who know that smart growth or new urbanism is the answer, and there are those who know that certain environmental standards or a way of treating adaptation and restoration. We all have a kind of a quiver filled with strategies that we believe in, quite frankly. And we're not really going to put those aside. But the reality is, this is a new time, and it's a really extraordinary time. My theory is that in '08, the Great Recession was born of the fact that we built too much of the wrong stuff in the wrong place. And we had, and that all the financing was just a way of subsidizing to move product that really was inappropriate. And there's no way this economy in the United States or here is going to get going again until we start building more of the right stuff in the right place. And, the construction industry has to come back, one form or another. Setting the groundwork for that, that's a new step, and that's a different step. Seeing this holistically in terms of that kind of physical, geographic reality, but also the economic reality and the environmental realities. Those are all the kind of foundational issues. But honestly, the specifics, I think, have to emerge as part of the process.
Michael?
Quick, is there anything in the work program that you saw in the grant application and things that have come out since then, anything that you think should be changed or resequenced? I mean, is there anything in your experience? I guess I'm looking for a little free advice here. Is there anything that you see that you would change in that? Or have you gotten that far yet? I don't.
I mean, again, I think it would take some time to really dig into this, but I mean, overall, it's a great work plan. Good job.
Oh, why?
Why, Joe?
Yeah, it has a lot to work with, and David and everybody who worked on that did a phenomenal job. I do think that I already mentioned. I think that we could bring alternatives. I would resequence a little bit, and I would take what you were going to do in Summit number 3 and bring it up into 2, which allows you again to really focus in between 2 and 3. On the development of the vision itself and maybe pivot points around a vision. So you can really hone in by number 3 on the kind of the physical framework of what this vision is going to be. And the entire period between number 2 and 4 plus is you're really focusing on how you're going to get it done. And how you're going to get it done and the physical vision itself are going to kind of interact with each other throughout. So I think you have a lot more time.
And what happens if you do that, when you do that at 2, you can figure out where the demonstration projects need to be. Where are the things that are going to be so critical, and who's going to volunteer to show us how it could happen or if it could happen at all. And that in the demonstration projects, going back to 2040, were the things that made the tipping point that people go, what is this transit-oriented developed mixed-use infill? I mean, talking 20 years ago, no one knew what it was. But you went down and show how it would happen, and actually people then saw it at a human scale. People need to see these blobs at a human scale that they can relate to, and that allows the demonstration projects to do that.
But here's a trick that we're now finding to be very useful, and it's a methodology. And a trick is maybe not the right word, but scenarios can be presented mapless. Right. In other words, there's a future that exists that's X% infill and Y% walkable and Z% auto-oriented. And we can paint pictures of futures without getting people immediately in the mud and the arm wrestling about, well, wait a minute, that's not the right spot, or that's, that we're never going to get that done. There's something about discussing the scenarios in terms of their larger impacts, economic, social, and environmental, before you get down to, okay, to make this scenario work, it's going to take this particular map. And what we find is people making them think first of consequences before they get to they're so ready to fight over the locational issues. They're so ready to say, I know that's never going to work, or that's, we don't have the means to make that possible, or I didn't even want that to happen, therefore I'm not for that scenario. So it's not so much a trick, but to make people think first holistically, long term, and in terms of consequences, and then say, okay, now that you've kind of headed us in the direction of this scenario, let's look at some maps that could make that scenario a reality. And then you get into the next level of arm wrestling, which we all know is hard, heavy lifting. But at least it's on the foundation that, gee, we've all agreed that this is the kind of future we want.
Just from a pure labor perspective and an efficiency perspective, you don't have to build out 4 really detailed alternatives when 3 of them are going to go away. And what you really want to do is be focusing in on the tuning of a direction. And I think that we can do that.
Next up is Randy Whitfield, who's our MPO director here in Palm Beach County.
Okay, a couple of things. I'm still trying to envision you two guys doing hip-hop.
It's an ugly scene. You know, we just talked over it.
Okay. I want to go back to your reliance on the consortium members to do a lot of that stuff. Maybe fill in a little more of the detail of that. As one of the potential consortium members here, I'm wondering how much, or what you're going to be looking for from us as opposed to what you're going to be taking from us and using to do your job.
Well, for example, in Louisiana, do I have to use that? In Louisiana, we're not the experts on wetland loss and redevelopment. You know, we work with Louisiana State University in their section to do that. There's no reason for us here to try to replace expertise that FAU and Florida International University have that are part of the consortium. We should use that information and tie into it and feed back and forth. They're researchers. They're going to want to know what the future is too, and they're going to be jazzed when we're working together with the universities. We work with universities a lot. The University of Utah is now holds the, we gave Envision tomorrow to them. It's public source. Chris Nelson and Reed Ewing, two of the best researchers, are building apps for that because it's a public resource. So the universities is one. The other one is transportation models. You know, we don't want to bring in a brand new model. If models need to be enhanced, that's one thing. But we're thinking that the model, at some point, the model that runs the RTPs need to be the ones that run the alternatives, so people know when they do an RTP with this new land use distribution what they're going to get out of it. How do they comply with federal air quality standards? How's their conformity? What does their transit ridership look like in the official model, which is what you're going to need to go and get funding for it? Those things are important for us not to try to come in and say, we're going to give you some sketch model from Indiana and, you know, we expect you guys to take those results. We want to work with the local MPOs, FDOT, and people that have solid modeling to interact with them. I mean, those are labor intensive, so we have sketch models that will give us interim results that let us know we're going in the right direction. We can do rapid prototyping. When it comes down to picking the vision, you guys want to determine that it's right with your models. We want the local public involvement you know, mechanisms that are out there in all the local governments to be used to get people involved. They're the ones that have the voice into neighborhood activists, into people that are excited, into the business community. They need to bring that up. We can't put together a PR program that's going to replace a grassroots involvement program that comes out of existing infrastructure. And those are just three examples of ways that we want to interact.
Our local team members.
And we have our local team members too, that's true. I mean, David's here all the time. Greg is part of Florida's ULI. You know, we're going to be using that to bring those people involved. So, I mean, it's not like we're trying to push work off onto you. It's not that kind of thing. It's that we think there's some things that you do, yeah, maybe, but that you do better than a consultant. You know, you do better than a consultant, and we want to figure out where that interaction is to empower both of us to do the best job possible.
And I think from the MPO's perspective, it's also interfacing with the locals. I think we've developed a process that's worked really well in Southern California, whereby the Envision tool is actually deployed locally, and we gather local input from local governments using that tool, which we then port up into our larger models. And so Chicago's done the same thing. So I don't think we as a small, you know, a team or any team should go to 200 jurisdictions and do that. But I think the MPOs are probably the right intermediary to get in with some of those jurisdictions and begin to develop that local input, potentially build some bridges in that process, and then we bridge to them, and then we port all that information. It's a great way of just interfacing with the locals and making sure that their input is being directly placed in the plans.
Are there more questions?
Well,
are we out of town?
No, you're not out of time.
10 minutes.
I wanted to ask about collective strength, because they seem to be part of your strategy for participation. They're not here, which I understand that happens and with other teams. But how would they be here during this planning process?
Yes, Robin is very great at coming in and doing the surveys. And not only that, Robin is a personality. One thing, Robin comes to town, all the press wants to talk to her. She's got a way of communicating these values in a way that just really excites people. So Robin's a great person. We've worked with her in Austin, in Dallas, in Tulsa, in Louisiana, and whenever we can. Basically, she really can capture what people are concerned about and how to message it. It's not just doing, here's your poll results. She really helps interpret that. And I wish we could have gotten her on the phone today even. She's a really great personality and someone that I have utmost confidence in and is also a very good friend.
Let me toss it down to Julia Tavarthan, who's the planning director of Boca Raton.
I guess my question is sort of goes off of Randy's. I mean, how do you intend to meaningfully engage all the different local governments we've got here, since ultimately a regional plan gets implemented on a block-by-block basis? And how does that get folded in, and how are you thinking in terms of outreach to municipalities and local governments?
You know, what we've done in the past is we have kind of, first of all, a technical advisory committee, a nice technical name that will get people to participate. But we interact with them by making sure they see we've seen their plans and their local policies. They are basically our peer review for all the technical work. And I think we've never had a problem getting them involved in the workshop process, in helping to review the material that comes out, the different scenarios. I think that it's been something that, because we speak their language and because we both at the land use and transportation side, the economic side, we talk to them about what they're concerned about and will help them solve their problems. I think we do get a very enthusiastic involvement. And the other thing is I hope it's clear, we're not anticipating that this is going to be primarily a regulatory implementation. One of the things that really would turn off a local planning director, I was one for 16 years, is another new regulation. I got enough problems keeping my people happy, but then there's this top-down thing. In a sense, what you find with regional plans, you want to find a coincidence of interests. You know, you have an interest in having a great center. Well, by golly, that if all the cities in the region have really dynamic centers, that helps transportation, it helps water consumption, it helps global warming. We found a coincidence of interest where empowering you to have a great center and a great mixed-use center is helping the region, and people will volunteer for that. So Southern California, when we started Compass, SCAG was probably the least popular MPO. I mean, it was really had a hard time with local relationships. Most of their interaction was going and doing the state's work on getting local governments to meet state requirements. Compass changed that to say, we have a little bit of money, we'd like to help you empower your main street, build a new economic center, whatever. And all of a sudden, Compass was looked at as, SCAG was looked at as a place to go for help, not just another, oh my God, here they come, they're going to regulate us, they're going to give us numbers we can't live with. And I think you know, it's really important that you start engaging local governments at a separate level. Starts by gathering their information, showing it back to them, showing how everything fits together, and engaging them. They're basically the source of the ideas on how to implement this stuff. We get a lot of that from finding out what works, what won't work, and engaging them. So, I mean, I don't have a committee structure that I can give you right now. It's easy enough to figure that out. I just know that we do it by understanding at a really deep level, a parallel level, a peer level, what their data is, what their issues are, and what their problems are.
You know, one of the new elements that's come into this is this fiscal impacts on local jurisdictions. The city managers, and you're the planning director, but the city managers, getting them engaged and getting them to think about the economic consequences to their city of these different scenarios has been a big breakthrough in Compass and in a lot of our plans. And because we now have that metric as part of our analysis tools, we can engage them in ways that are really positive and proactive. And once they get involved, they draw in the locals in a way that doesn't quite happen just with the planning departments.
Let me ask Lois Bush from FDOT if she has a question.
There's a lot of discussion about using these processes to deal with new growth and demographic change and climate change down here. We're talking about probably a lot of internal migration. what the young urban professionals desire. We have a lot of tourists, we have immigration. So are these processes sound like they can accommodate something like that, but that's not typically something that's out front is what they ought to be looking at and addressing. Along with new growth, what about movement of the people who are already here for various reasons?
Yeah, the models, of course, have to simulate where population shifts take place. And in the end, those are end state conditions for the model. In other words, population has shifted from this area to this, the density has changed, the level of economic activity has changed. And so clearly all the models do take that into account. Being predictive about that, what was it that Babe Ruth said? A prediction is difficult, especially when it involves the future.
Yogi Berra.
Yogi Berra. So this is one of the $64,000 questions, which is exactly. But that's why we have scenarios, so we can frame those issues and bracket that. But certainly that's a big component.
And I just like to say we work with infill. Most of our areas that we work with, they are out of vacant land or vacant land scarce for whatever reason. You have to really look at revitalization. And then you bring in the issue of basically poor neighborhoods, areas that are maybe well located but have had poverty or economic disaffection. And you have to be able to work with having infill and redevelopment and reinvestment empower those places, bring up their prosperity, not displace them to someplace else. And I think that's something else we're really sensitive to and really good at in terms of building areas where prosperity is shared, not displaced. And I think that's going to be an important issue here. I'm sure a lot of the places that are critical have pockets of poverty and want financial improvement, but don't want to have to move away because of it.
Discussion now about equitable TOD, not just TOD.
Right, exactly. And it's something we've worked on not just in the theoretical level, but on the implementation side.
Any other questions? I think we're set. Thank you so much.
Wait.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There's
Charlie.
one question that wasn't answered, and I've been asked to answer it, and that is, why this team? And as somebody who's I grew up in South Florida, I've been involved here for about 35 years in various ways, and I taught a course at FAU with Yop this past summer about rethinking planning in Florida. And my original reaction to this is that I just was going to stay doing that and not get involved. But when EDSA, one of our great local firms that has had such a mark on Florida, called me to talk about Peter considering to put together a team and getting to know them, I wanted to be involved. And I believe we're the right team. We have the diversity of history and experience and professional, and we have the commitment. The commitment because they've done everything and they keep coming back in their places. Commitment because all of us are in the community. This is our area. So I really think we have it all, and that's why we should be your team.